I'm so very grateful for you all to find the time in this busy week to jump on at this time of day for us. Thank you so much. And I am Natalie Isaacs. I am the founder of 1 Million Women, and you are our beautiful 1 Million Women community. It's just so lovely to have you here. And before I get started, I would love our beautiful Jemima Pascoe, a proud Whale One woman from the Awabakal land in the Central West. And Jemima is going to do our welcome and our acknowledgement of country.
Hey, thanks, Nat. As a proud Whale One woman from Warren out in New South Wales Central West, who's currently living on Awabakal land, I'd like to welcome you all and acknowledge and pay my respects to the Awabakal peoples of the land from which I am joining you all today. I would also like to extend my love and respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples present today, and to all First Nations people joining us from around the world, and to all First Nations elders and leaders who are paving the way for our youth and fighting to protect our planet for future generations. It is the knowledge that lives within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and all First Nations peoples' cultures and in our hearts, our histories, that will help guide us on this climate journey as we act for our planet, for country, and for our futures. As a Whale One woman, I've always felt a strong connection to not only my country out west, but also to the Wanneroo country on which I was born and raised, and the community there that I was welcomed into for the first 18 years of my life, and also a connection to the Awabakal land on which I am currently residing. Connection to country is such an important and special bond, and a feeling and one that I am infinitely grateful for. It is a connection that comes with both positives and negatives, unfortunately, though. While it is a connection to country, to our land, to my ancestors, and to my history, it also comes with a physical and spiritual pain when witnessing such destruction. The Wanneroo country on which I grew up on is home to one of the largest open-cut coal mines in the Southern Hemisphere. I watched the land around me go from lush, green, beautiful, thriving land to completely destroyed, brown, the air quality visually deteriorated. There was always a brown ring around the horizon. And seeing the waterways impacted as well has been absolutely devastating. Witnessing the change of the landscape every time I returned home to visit from university was also just absolutely heartbreaking. And then also out west, where my country is on Whale One land, we've had in the last 5 years alone severe droughts where my cousins, my family, my aunties, our elders physically relocated fish and protected our totems from pretty much dying and drying up in the water that was there. We've had dust storms, mice plagues, bushfires, and all of these have come with threats to our sacred sites. So our Macquarie marshes and also the birthing trees that my great-grandmother helped her mum and aunties deliver their children under. We are a matriarchal mob, so the power and strength of women is always something that has been ingrained within me. And coming to 1 Million Women, it's also something that is abundantly obvious that women are the way forward, and listening to especially our First Nations women is the way that we will all change the future for our planet. And yeah, I am so grateful to everybody who's joining us here today, and I'd like to hand back to Nat.
Thank you so much, Jem. That was really, really beautiful and special. Your words are just so perfect. I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Gadigal people of the lands of which I'm speaking to you from today. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And we recognise that there is no climate justice without social justice to our First Nations peoples. Hello, everyone. It is just so lovely to see so many of our community here, and a big welcome to our wonderful speakers today, to Lorena Aguilar, Tish King, and Jo Dodds. So this is an hour together to connect with each other, to share our exciting plans for 2023 for 1 Million Women, and it's to give us a snapshot of some of the things that happened at COP27 just a few weeks ago in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And the three incredible women joining you today, Lorena, Tish, and Jo, are dear friends of mine. All of them have their own deeply personal and raw perspectives of their time at COP27 and the work that they do for their communities, for this earth, and for us all. And to you three women, we thank you so very much for the work that you do. And thank you to you all. You are the heart and soul of 1 Million Women, and we wouldn't be a movement without our beautiful community from all over the world. And it has been a really big year for all of us at the 1 Million Women HQ headquarters. And I just want to acknowledge the incredible inner team at 1 Million Women, Jem, who you just met. There's Bree, Alison, Lucy, Shay, and Caroline and Carolyn. We have been really working hard this year on a beautiful, bold new campaign, which we're launching next year, and we will share a taste of that a little later on. And for me, it's been a really big year too. I had my second book right here, right now, How Women Can Lead the Way in this climate emergency. It was published in August, and I have been on a book tour ever since, and it has been so wonderful to be out there in the community again, having so many conversations with so many wonderful people, literally hundreds and hundreds of women and some good men too across New South Wales, and then moving into Queensland. And writing this second book was really important to me. It is the outpouring of the knowledge that I have gained over the last decade of being, the founder of 1 Million Women. It is how climate action cascades from individuals and households through to communities and collectively into every space and every place in society. And there is so much discussion of the science, of the evidence of it happening, of the politics and the policies and the economics. And I think that why I wanted to write this book, it is about following the social threads of climate action and that power that we all have, and that gives us to all be part of the solution. So I was at COP for a much shorter time this year. The COP goes for 2 weeks. COP27 went for 2 weeks, but I was only there for the second week, and not for all of the second week, for most of it. And for me, it was really important to be there, to connect with many women who are so deeply important to me, and to give me this opportunity to share the work that we are doing over the next 2 years, and to get the guidance and direction and from the women who have mentored me so much over the years. And I always come away from these COPs with a seesaw of emotions. I have been to 6 of them now, and I think there is always deep anger. There's deep anger for for there not being enough done. There's overwhelming sadness for what we could lose, and there's frustration at how slow things are going, and frustration with the way of the negotiations. But for me, every time I come away at the end of this feeling more determined than ever, and I'm filled with active optimism at the power of people and the collective power that we all possess. And so that's why I'm excited to have these 3 women sharing their knowledge on this call today. And Lorena, I'm going to come to you first. Lorena is a really dear friend of mine. Lorena has worked for more than 20 years on climate change and gender. And she is constantly around the negotiating table at COPs, and she is invaluable in this fight for climate justice for women. And so Lorena and I met about a decade ago, about a decade ago. And it was because 1 million women won an award, a United Nations award. It was called for Momentum for Change, which is a program of the United Nations. It was a Lighthouse Award. We were seen as a beacon of hope, and that was under Lorena's leadership. And my daughter, Shay, who's on the Zoom call today, and I, and Tara, who was co-CEO at the time, and our families, we went to COP in Warsaw in 2013 to receive our award as guests of the UN. And I think that introduced me to the greater movement, the greater women's movement that was happening in the world. The extraordinary women from across this planet fighting for climate justice, such as Lorena, and in whatever capacity that they could. And so many of those friends are now my long life friends. And seeing Lorena in action is impressive. And before I go to you, Lorena, I just want to read, because Lorena is a voice, a big voice in my book. And I just want to read what I say about her to introduce her. My friend Lorena Aguilar, a veteran in the gender and climate space, has devoted her life to empowering women and fighting for climate justice. I love her dearly. The work she does is so important. Lorena was recently, this is a little while, Costa Rica's Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, and among many roles also served for nearly 2 decades as the Global Senior Gender Advisor for the International Union of the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN. 30 years ago, Lorena recalls people thinking she was crazy to talk about the link between gender and women's empowerment and the environment on every front. Biodiversity, drylands, wetlands conservation, protected areas, climate change. But she made it her lifelong commitment, educating the environmental movement and the women's movement. She has worked with women from all around the world and has helped shine a light on the innovative, transformational value of what women bring to the table. She has helped bring so many women into key climate forums so their voices can be heard and their solutions can be seen. So, Lorena, over to you, and please share with us your work and your time at COP and your time as a negotiator for women's rights and gender equality.
Thank you, Nat. I think that in these years of working on this topic, you have been one of the gifts that I have received from life. Thank you. Thank you for 1 million women. Thank you for your work and for the work of all these women that you have brought together. As you say, it has been a long journey. It has been a journey of almost 30 years. When people talk about COPs, they think that COPs is only the 15 days that we arrive. And it's farther a long process. I mean, in between COPs, there are a lot of meetings that we engage, and the process of negotiations happens in a whole year in between COPs. So once we get to COP, a lot of the things are already pretty much on track and done and negotiated. So how do I get involved on climate change? I mean, as you said, I had been supporting the CBD many years ago, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and then the Convention on the Certification. And one day I had the crazy idea, we have to work with the Climate Change Convention. At that time, it was a convention pretty much dealing only with emissions and cutting emissions and mitigation. And the human face was basically nowhere to be seen. So when we started in 2008, creating the first coalition supported by Finland, which was very important, who believed that we were not crazy in trying to bring gender into the discussion, we were able to first develop the knowledge, because the knowledge on what and how to link gender and climate change was not there. And then we went out to build the capacity of decision makers, of ministers, of negotiators, of the delegations. And for the first time, when we were in Warsaw, one delegation from Sierra Leone and Liberia stood up and said, and gender is important. So the story started in Bali in 2008, and today, thanks to these little seeds that we planted, we have more than 104 mandates in the convention. We have women. When we started the process, now we talk about women constituency. It was not even there. It was not created. We had to fight for women to have a voice in the climate change work. So it has been a long trip, Nat, in that sense. Every COP is different. Every COP has its ups and downs when it comes to gender. When I was working in the government of Costa Rica, we had the honor to host the pre-COP. And it was the first pre-COP that had human rights and diversity at the center, at the core. And this was thankful to our president. When we were choosing the three main topics, I fight very hard for my topics, and other people were fighting as hard as I was for other topics. And the president said, number one, human rights and gender. You can pick the other two. So I think it is important. It has to do a lot with the presidency of the COPs and how they supported. We saw it in Peru, how the Minister of Environment at that time made gender important. And you have the Lima Work Program on gender, thanks to that. How did it went in this COP? I think it's a mixed feeling that we have, all of us that were at COP27. We did advance in some topics like loss and damage. I mean, there was a major discussions. You know that the COP was delayed for many days. It didn't close the day that it was supposed to close, and there was an agreement to create a mechanism, a funding mechanism for loss and damage. That means that there are countries that are suffering the effects of climate change, and there is not a fast track to access resources that could help you overcome, like the disasters that we're seeing in Pakistan, or we're seeing in Bangladesh, or in the Caribbean, or even in some of the small islands in the Pacific. So right now, there is, yes, an agreement, but that's it. We don't know how that is going to look like. We don't know where the funds are going to come, if it is going to get funded or not. So that is a major challenge that we have at the moment. We know, for example, that other countries have committed millions of dollars for the Green Climate Fund, but from commitment to paying what they have said that they're going to do has not happened. So we don't know right now what is going to happen with loss and damage. So a lot of people are saying, hooray, hooray for loss and damage. And we're saying, yes, with precaution, because right now we don't know how it's going to look like and how easy it's going to be to access those resources, because to have access to some of the climate change funds is not easy at all. But then I think one of the areas in which we lost was gender, definitely. We see a text, I mean, this time was the revision of the second gender action plan at the middle of the execution. From my point of view, we went back 4 or 5 years on text, nothing new, a lot of text, a more visionary text that was put there since the meat of the negotiations. As I said, there is something that is called SBI and SBSTA that happens in June or July. Some text was moved forward with very interesting mentions to topics like the care economy, and all of that disappeared. And they spent hours and hours negotiating for text that he's already agreed. So I think that we saw the women movement extremely upset with the result of COP27, calling for implementation, something that should have happened since the second gender action plan. So I think that now we have the challenge to really create something stronger for the third gender action plan. And we are already in conversations, and I can tell you a little bit more on that respect later. I think I was on my 7 minutes,
yeah.
hopefully.
I know.
I'm keeping my timer. I'm keeping my timer, Nat.
I know. I've given everyone 7 minutes. I'm just, yes. But it is, you know, just listening to Lorena there, it's, you know, those of us that, you know, are not deep in the whole process of the COP, it, you know, one time when I went to COP, it was days just on, you know, one word, and is it the right word in the text, and so it's it is a very frustrating process, I guess, looking in, but goodness, it must be frustrating being in it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I want to bring Tish in now because you know, Tish King is a climate activist. She works for the wonderful Groundswell giving organization. And actually in the chat, I'm sorry, I forgot to explain. And when we come back, Lorena, if you could let us know all about what you're doing currently, and we will put the link up in the chat. And so back to Tish. She works for Groundswell Giving. Check it out. We'll put the link up. It's an amazing organization, and it needs all of us. And she is honestly the rising voice in climate action. And I have watched Tish step into her agency as a extraordinary, powerful young woman fighting for her beloved lands and peoples. And, you know, Tish is another beautiful voice in my book. And I remember when I was talking to Tish about my book, and I was telling her that several years ago, as part of, you know, as 1 Million Women, I went to the Marshall Islands for the Micronesian Women's Climate Conference. And I witnessed the ravages of climate change from sea level rise. And I heard the stories from women across the Pacific, you know, from Fiji and Kiribati and Nauru and Palau and the Marshall Islands and so on. And the stories of sea level rise were so sad and so deeply moving. And yet at the time, I actually, and I was saying this to Tish, I actually did not connect it to what was happening in my own country's Torres Strait communities. And Tish, welcome to today. And can you share a little bit with everybody on the call, a little bit about your home in the Torres Strait and what is happening there and what you're doing specifically at COP27?
Oh my gosh, so much in there. No, thank you so much for that introduction. And I always get like rosy red cheeks, I feel, because I'm like, but hi everyone. You've just given me so much love seeing all of these amazing squares online. It is that time of the year where you're sort of like treading water on this side of Christmas. But I'm Tish, Blackfish. I am a proud Kukulug woman from Kukugal Nation, the island of Masig, Zendith Kes, known commonly as the Torres Strait Islands. And we are part of the First Nations group here in so-called Australia. I'd actually like to acknowledge to the traditional custodians where I live and work on Kulin kinship. I recognise that sovereignty has not been ceded here in this country, and I pay my respects to elders both past and present, our emerging leaders across the community and nation. And I think, you know, one thing that I've taken away from this year with like reflections is that, you know, where could I be without the many footprints before us? And so I would like to honor and acknowledge those that have gone before us and honor their contributions to community and the climate justice movement, to the women before us, the matriarchs. I know that I am here because of that. And so SLTCC Jem as well for opening us up with your acknowledgement. So, wow, mouthful. I guess, yes, I'm the Philanthropy and Engagement Officer at Groundswell Giving, and make up also the First Nations team, where we strategically fund climate action. And so our vision is that within this critical decade, our community will turbocharge collective giving to strategically respond to this crisis we all are living in and create a more healthy and just sustainable future. And so prior to moving in this sort of like fundraising sort of space of the climate movement, I was deep in grassroots campaign organizing. And I think Ansing, just to share a little bit about those that don't know too much about the Torres Strait Islands. It's made up of 150 islands between mainland Australia and Papua New Guinea, and only 18 of them have island communities. And I come from this beautiful nation that translates to the Central Island Group, that is like Bora Bora, across the Caribbean, across the Maldives. It's like so pretty, so delightful, and so lush. And I think, the heart of everything that gives me the mana, the love, and the spirit to do the work and I guess be in these spaces is that, before I could, I remember learning about the sea before I could actually walk. And I used to sit with my matriarch and patriarch, and we would stare out across the ocean, and where they would share about the deep connection to salt water. And my Athe, who was my patriarch, would yarn about his time on the pearling lugger boats, and said that if we respected and looked after our ocean would look after and protect us. And our culture is so embedded into the practices of the ocean, where our people didn't have a written language. It was through our songs, our dances, island practices, and food, where we gathered together, where we sat down, where we prayed, we shared, and we listened. It was that language of community, culture, and country that has always bound us together. And it was always, I knew then, my responsibility to always fight for her. And so this comes up through the, I guess, where I'm at right now. I'm also an organizer for Our Islands Are Home when I'm not with Groundswell, supporting the small team there that where right now we're actually seeing these irreversible damage from sea levels rising, which you just shared, Nat, about your experiences in the Pacific. That is, creating more, I guess, disparities and hardship, where we're finding it hard for fresh water accessibility. We're finding, we are now seeing damage of our sacred sites. And where after the summer of our massive bushfires in 2019 and 2020, I went home to Masig and picked up the pieces of bones from one of my matriarchs, because the sea levels rising are taking away our islands. And so it has been a big year. We've saw here in Australia, we've seen lots of shifts in government, local, state, and federal. But for my community, and something that I feel really proud about, is that on September 23rd, the Torres Strait 8 with the campaign Our Islands Are Home actually won a historic landmark case with the UN Human Rights Committee, a legal fight against the Australian government for their inaction on climate change, which is Australia being the first developed nation that is accountable for their emissions. And so it was, through the rights of, every human has an inherent right to life, practice culture, and remained on our island homes. And I think this is a good segue into sort of relating it back to COP. And I think sort of like what Lorena said, we've nearly had 30 COPs, but all of these frameworks came under the same umbrella and outcomes from 1992 Rio Summit World Leaders Gathering. And I think that's when we need to sort of, when we talk about these COPs conference, we need to look back at the beginning. And it was where this incredible 12-year-old then young person from Turtle Island, Severin Suzuki, spoke and shared about, people are connected to land, our mountains, our oceans, that, when we see these destructions of our natural wonders, it is people who continue to care and live and protect these systems that are being impacted from Western land systems. And like what you said, Lorena, earlier, was that it was about, we're talking about environment, we're talking about emissions, but we're not talking about humans. We're not talking about people. And so, I think that's when, I guess, in a nutshell, and, less than a couple of minutes, essentially, these outcomes of COPs have been from, this is my second one that I just went to. And what I've understood is that, there are many challenges to systems, but it's really important to have a presence of First Nations people globally, but women in these spaces, because systems are still slow, but we need to be there to advocate. And you just sharing progression, Lorena, about gender equality just still goes to show here we are at 30 and we still need to, we're fighting to save humanity, from us, from our own, greed for resources. And so what came out of, say, let's go COP21, Paris Agreement, because people are very familiar with that. They sort of like made commitments, like the outcomes was to keep global temperatures rising this century below 2 degrees. And we refer to a lot of it in a lot of our conversations, like, 1.5 to stay alive. We need to keep these, well below 2 degrees, because we are seeing these impacts of sea levels rising on communities, not just in the Torres Straits, but also, in our brothers and sisters in the Pacific Islands. We're also seeing that globally, but also extreme wet, extreme heat, flash flooding. And so I guess, the biggest thing was that COP26, so last year, Glasgow, was really, I guess, it fell short of developing country expectations. And I think that's where we really needed to see implementation this year. And so, pledges and actions coming out of COP26, regarding adaptation, finance, and L&D was simply insufficient. And so it was really important for communities like mine that have been impacted, that I'm seeing, my communities use crate pellets and stuff coconut trees and coconut husks and palm leaves as their first barrier to, these sea levels rising. It was, it's so important to be a part of these conversations. There was a lot that happened, and there was a lot on loss and damage. And like Lorena said, there is challenges, and that, will be to each different community. But while we did see, this being a historic moment, there's gonna, it's not ambitious enough. And there's a lot of language of the urgency that's been diluted. And so I think, before I leave you all, something to remind us is that, fossil fuel lobbyists were the largest delegation again at a climate conference this year. There were developed nations continuing to push for carbon capture and storage and nuclear technology. They even had polar bears as pro-nuclear techs. And so we need to make sure, I guess, we continue these conversations no matter where we are, no matter what time of the year, because, this is a journey and we're still on it. But I'll pass it back over to you. I feel like that's 7 minutes / more. Sorry.
Oh gosh, Tish, yeah, you know, so much emotion there, and we are on a journey, but we have to you know, fasten the pace, because the line in the sand is 2030. You know, we have to be reducing our emissions by a minimum of 50% by 2030. And so this needs to be accelerated at a pace we've never seen before. And it needs us all, you know, it needs us all to be doing whatever we can, wherever we are, in whatever capacity we have, to use our voice and our everyday actions, everything that's at our fingertips. We're not all perfect at this, but we need to be loud, and we need to live it, and we need to fight for it too. And so, Jo, I'm going to bring you in now, and Jo Dodds, who is also fighting for her communities, and her communities that are feeling the full force of climate change. And Chanel Sheck was Jo's second COP, and we met at COP26, and she is shining a light on the devastating bushfires and the absolute link between them and climate change. She's the founder of Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action, and Jo and I shared a very special day at COP, and it is a memory anchor that I will have forever. And it was a day of regeneration and restoration and renewal. I will say that, because it was a day off. It wasn't a working day at COP, and it was a Sunday. And we went snorkeling in the spectacular Red Sea and the Coral Coast, and it was bursting with coloured corals and multicolored fish and the clearest of blue water. And we spent the day lifting each other up, linking arms, being there for each other. And I think that is just so important and so needed for us all in this climate fight. And Jo, just thank you for that day. It's mine forever. It really is. And I just would like you to share, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but the first question is, why did you decide to go to COP27, and what was your reason for going and your takeaway from it?
Thanks, Nat. Yes, and before I get into that, I'm going to say, yeah, it was a great day. We literally went deep together into the ocean. We took ourselves into the environment that is one of those liminal environments that we're all fighting to save, and to be there in that place, another world under the water with the fish and the coral, and to see how magnificent that is one of those inspirational things for me. And to be able to share that with you at a COP, it was a 3, 4, 5-way special time. So thank you for that. So why did I go to COP27? I knew it'd be a hard COP because it was set in Egypt, and I know that Egypt has its own particular difficulties, and certainly gender is a pretty high issue on that list for me, having been to Egypt many, many decades ago. So I kind of knew what I was in for in terms of the location, and it did throw up exactly the sort of challenges I thought that it would. But I did a lot of thinking before committing to going to that COP, because it is expensive to go. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of personal resources from me, but also from my team of Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action people. Oh, and I just need to note, I'm not the founder of Bushfire Survivors. I'm one of the founders. So it really was a joint, very organic joint effort in the beginning, and we kind of all bubbled up together, and then eventually someone had to be, each of these roles, and I ended up in this one, which is a huge privilege to be able to represent those people. So yeah, it takes a lot of resources to get to a COP. It's stressful when you get there. I was talking to one of the bureaucrats who was there, and managed to make her cry on the last day, and she was a bit embarrassed, and I said, it's not a COP until you've cried. And I've cried at both of the COPs I've attended. So they're full on emotional experiences for good and bad reasons. But after introspecting a fair deal and investigating my motives for wanting to go, I realized that it still is so critical to have lived experience voices be at those events, which are the big decision-making opportunities for governments and those highest level, if we can call it high, decision makers. And one of the things that my organisation had committed to in the year before was to work more with First Nations people to elevate their voices, to make sure that we weren't stealing any oxygen from them in situations like the media available at a COP, because last COP in 26, bushfire survivors, we did manage to get a lot of media, and I came away thinking that was fantastic until I thought, well, who missed out as a result? And that was potentially First Nations people. So we went with a plan to working with Tish and working with Ricky Dank from Gudunji for Country, and working with some other amazing people from Pacifica and Papua New Guinea, and it was just a wonderful experience to be with those men and women as part of their crew and their team, and not just be a standalone on my own too. So that I felt really supported being there with those people to elevate again the voices of these people who are being directly impacted. And I'm sort of ashamed to say it was only recently that it really struck me deeply. If losing what my community has lost we lost homes in 3 fire events over just over 3 years. So my community just got hit repeatedly by fires. We also had floods, which mostly damaged roads, not homes. And we had big storms that meant the sea came and damaged a lot of infrastructure and homes as well. So we just got hammered there for a few years leading up to and including the so-called Black Summer, which of course went for longer than summer. And so I didn't lose my home. That was one of the reasons I'm able to step into this space, is I didn't have to deal with everything that flows from that. But I did watch my neighbours lose their homes and my friends lose their homes. 69 homes in my tiny community, just in the Tathra fire alone, and then another 400 across my community with the 2019-20 fires. And I know many of those people, dozens of those people really well. I've been to their homes. I've partied in their homes. I've gone for dinner. My writing group, it was in one of those homes. And yet seeing how hard it was to lose all of that, and then understanding just a little bit, the tip of the iceberg, I suspect, of what it's like to lose not only your home, but when you're First Nations people, the place itself that holds your culture and your stories and yourself, that so much emanates from that. And I've only got the barest of a white person understanding of that, but it suddenly was an overwhelming realization for me that there were people with even more at stake than us in this period of the fossil fuel industry just running roughshod over the lives of people around the world. So that was kind of why I wanted to go to COP, to challenge those I think it's around 500 representatives from the fossil fuel sector. I think it was more this time, maybe 600. And as you said, more than the representatives from any single nation. And I think it's right. Thanks, Lorena. It's so important to turn up and be seen and to speak against what they're doing. And I think there are very few forces in the world who have any hope of pushing back against the power and the wealth of those industries and structures and businesses. But there is an opportunity for people who can tell the story of the damage that's being done, in my case, to ordinary Australians in regional areas and in urban areas from the smoke and the heat. Bring those stories to somewhere like COP, tell them in front of politicians, tell them as a representative of your everyday communities, and you have some hope of pushing back against those big polluters who are trying to propagate very different stories about the dependencies. And we need to say, yes, there's profits to be made, and yes, it will hurt the economy to an extent to reduce the fossil fuel use as urgently as we need to. But what we're not saying in those conversations still enough is the cost of not doing that. And the cost of not doing that is everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, you've answered actually all the questions that I had. And I think it's really important point. And I'd like to bring Lorena and Tish back in now, because I think that is a really important point in terms of being there to stand up to politicians, to tell your stories, and and you know, Tish, you said it, Lorena, you said it. It is, you know, and it's a question that I did want to ask you all is, you know, if you feel that the COPs are necessary, and you know, I mean, I'm going to say my thoughts first, because I think they are absolutely necessary. Of course, we can't just rely on the COPs, and Lorena, you all know the work that goes into it before the 2 weeks, but I see it as we need it all. We need everything that's going on with civil society, with what everybody's using, their ingenuity and their creativity, but we need the COP process as well. That's what I think. But I just want to ask you all what you think about, now that you've been, Lorena, the veteran of COPs, and both of you been to 2, do you see that they're necessary? Lorena, you first.
It's the biggest challenge the world has ever faced as a whole, as a humanity, is climate change. And I think COVID was the second one to really prove us that we're part of one ecosystem. So I think that it has taken the world a lot of time to figure out how to negotiate on a crisis that the system was not made to deal with, because it was meant to deal basically with conflicts between 2 or 1 countries, some major elements, but not the crisis at the level that we have, and in the hands of the politicians, which unfortunately have very short periods of times. They have commitments that they have to pay back. And I really think that one of the problems with climate change is that we have to rely more on the science and less on the politicians. A lot of the decisions should be made based on science and not in political decisions. Unfortunately, that is the UN system, in which it is the governments and the parties that have to negotiate, and we can push and puff and do as many things as we want, but who is at the end at the tables are the governments. And those governments, and you have seen it in Australia, I don't have to explain this, how the position changes depending on the party that is there. There has been important changes. And for example, Nat, remember when your daughter could not participate on your award because of her age, because she was youth? So I think one of the big changes that we have seen, and this is a fight that we gave under the table, that nobody put it on the newspaper, but we fought so hard that youth could be part of the convention. And you have that story. She couldn't go in because of her age. People under 18 were not allowed at all to be in the negotiations. That has changed. The diversity of women as well. I mean, sometimes I feel I don't need to go to COPs anymore, because now there are so many involved women from different parts of the world. It's a diversity of women that now participates in the COP, that at the beginning, we were 4 little piglets trying to run here and there, very few brown or black people, basically very white, and that has substantially changed. And we have 104 mandates now, and nobody can jump over that easy. We have a tool to demand now ambition and implementation is our mantra, and they cannot move us away from that. We cannot allow people to take us away from the three more important things: implementation, implementation, and implementation. I can't hear you, Nat. No, we can't hear you at all.
Now, yes. Yes. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to go to both of you, but we're now at 1:55, and I've still got to get through. I'm ready, and we've got to get our anthem. And so I'm so sorry we had questions that we were going to ask, and it's better to hear your voices anyway. So this is the only question we've got time for. I'm sorry, team. So Jo and Tish, Jo first. What do you think, now that you've been to 2 COPs, the process, the COP process, is it necessary? And actually, one other question, you can answer either. The other question I was going to ask you is, for so many of us, and practically everyone on this call, we are not part, I go to the COPs, of course, but we're not part of the COP process. And we are very disconnected from it. And so answer either question. What do you say we should be doing on a day? And I know the answer to that too, but on a day-to-day level, that knowing that most of us aren't even part of or are privy to that whole COP process. So one of the questions, you go first, Jo.
Yep. So I've got a quick pitch, and it is that the COPs are important, but they're not the only tool in the box. Right. So if you can get to a COP and you can have influence at a COP, and you've got a story that's powerful and a place to do that, go to a COP. If that's not possible or appropriate or isn't an effective use of the resources, then you do the next thing. And I noticed there was a great question from Heather about what can an individual do? Well, I'm an individual, and Nat's an individual, and Lorena and Tish, we are all just individuals doing the thing. One thing I always say to people is, firstly, don't start your own organization, because there's millions of organizations out there. Join a really good one. Now, I didn't take that advice because I started an organization, but that's because there wasn't one. Yep, we're all guilty of bits of this. But if there isn't the one that you really absolutely need, do that. But otherwise, join the organizations that already exist, who've done I was going to swear just then, but I pulled it back, done those friggin' hard yards of setting things up and finding a strategic path to actually affect change, because you can shortcut all of those learnings by getting in there, getting as involved as you can, because we're at that critical point in the entirety of human history. It's unbelievable that few women have been born at this point where so much rests on what we do every day, and we can't just leave it to a few of the people who put their hand up. Every single one of us who understand the problem, need to engage as much as we can and be as active as we can. And when we see the people who we think, you're making the change I want to see, then support those people. Ask those people directly, what can I do to either empower you or to empower my voice to make that difference? I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and okay, so everybody, I am asking you right now to give yourselves 10 more minutes. It's the week before Christmas. We're all slowing down. Please stay on for just another 10 minutes, and then we can do the rest of the event. I'm going to go to Tish to ask this last question, and then we'll move on. But hang in there for 10 more minutes. Thank you, Tish.
Thanks, Nat, and thanks to the amazing ladies for sharing your words. And I think just going back to what Jo said earlier about, it's not about, what's at stake if we don't. And for me, as we continue to warm and burn fossil fuels, we're going to continue to see the globe warm and ice sheets melt and our oceans rise. That's going to not only impact rising oceans, it's going to impact ecosystems, that families that are so dependent on, and communities on natural resources. And so I guess, with all of that in mind, it really came back down to those opening words of like climate justice is First Nations justice. You know, despite centuries of sustained oppression against our existence as First Nations people, it's First Nations people that have retained our traditions, our distinct cultures, economic and political structures, and through centuries of oppression, colonization, and attempt to assimilation, our people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, Black people, Indigenous people globally, they have survived and persevered. And so we have to come to these spaces because climate justice does not reduce a climate crisis to a puzzle simply focused on counting carbon. Solutions must be guided by practices and articulated and evaluated by frontline voices and communities that center environmental justice, just transition, gender equality, and grassroots organizing led by us and for us. And so going back to that implementation, these are the systems that govern it. So we have to work the systems, to understand the systems, to master the system, so we can come back and make that our government's parties accountable domestically. And so, like exactly what Jo said, there are incredible groups out there. And I hope that you, after this, go and check out Groundswell Giving, because if it's something this Christmas, you want a gift to give to someone, I reckon it's funding climate action, because groups like 1 Million Women, bringing people together to be able to continue to do this work and amplify and create safe spaces, we need it more. Thank you, Essel, everyone. Thanks for staying on. Essel Nat.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much to you three amazing women, and to all the amazing women. You are all amazing on this call, but thank you so much to you three for the work that you do. We are behind you, we are with you, we're linking arms, and I'm still here. Yeah. Sorry, I've gone, my lights have gone off here, but and we are all in this together, doing what we can, and that's important. And so I would like to take the next 5 minutes just to finish off and to tell you that, this decade counts more than ever, and 1 Million Women is gearing up for this. We've been working so hard over this last year, digging deep about what is the biggest impact that we can make as a community of women, and what can we do over the next 2 years? What can we really do to gather and galvanize our community to respond to the urgency and the speed and scale at which we need to act? And so we're launching a new campaign, and you've probably all seen it, and it's called I'm Ready, and we're launching it in the new year. And it's our commitment for the next 2 years. And we're going to focus on 3 areas. We're going to focus on that we must get more politically engaged. We need to have climate conversations with every level of government all the time. We can change the hearts and minds of politicians if enough of us are having those climate conversations with our elected MPs in every electorate all of the time, sharing what we're doing in our lives, building relationships, but more importantly, championing those politicians who will do everything to put climate action and everything that we've talked about today at the top of their agenda. And if we can champion those politicians, regardless of what side of politics they are from, and if they are brave and courageous enough to take that into their party room, the party rooms that are not accelerating climate action, then we are helping to bring about bipartisan support, and that is so needed. And so we are going to have in-home gatherings, town hall gatherings. We're going to do training and Zoom training and give you the tools and resources to have those conversations with each other and with our politicians. We're going to focus on the day-to-day stuff, because that is also needed more than ever. How to, electrify our lives and degasify our homes, and how to use our economic power as women with every dollar we spend and every dollar that we invest. for the good of the planet. And, you know, we've already started. Look, with my book tour, we are already underway over the last 2 months, I've literally engaged hundreds and hundreds of women on this, and we will not stop in the new year. And we're going to launch I'm Ready with a big weekend of gatherings at the end of April. And I want every one of you on this call to please host a gathering so that we can start this, not start, but that we are courageous, we are brave, we are women, and we are ready to take on these next 2 years like never before. And that's what I'm Ready is all about. We're going to show you just a 1-minute little video right now to give you a taste of I'm Ready. It was just the photo shoot that we did, but in the new year, we are going to really launch it. And there's a doc, if you can see the Google Doc there, if you can open that Google Doc, and it will say, yes, I'd love to be part of I'm Ready. I'd love to host a gathering. I'd like to volunteer. I'd like more information. Please download, open up that form, fill it in. And we'll know that you're ready to act. So Bree, can you just show the little 1-minute video?
I made the big effort to come today because I want to be re-energised by 1 million women. And I just want this energy flow to go around the world again and said, oh my God, we've been doing it for a decade. Let's keep doing it. It's fantastic.
I'm very excited to be involved in the 1 Million I'm Ready campaign because I'm really concerned about the impact on people living in the Pacific region and the impact on their mental health of climate change.
I am here to support 1 million women in the next such an exciting phase. It is so important, such a critical time, and we can all step up and do so much more and have a better life. And 1 million women is here to show how we can do that so easily in our daily lives.
We as women can inspire our communities, can make a difference. We can make such a huge difference to our planet through all the amazing actions and inspiration for everyone to deliver a better planet for all human beings.
I'm ready. I'm passionate. I'm courageous. I'm ready.
Mother Nature needs all of us women right across the globe to get involved with this fantastic organisation. If there's 8 billion people, then there's 4 billion women ready to tackle climate.
I'm ready. Are you ready? We're ready?
Yeah. Get ready!
We're just so, we've been working on it for a long time. We're just going to be so grateful and relieved when we can finally launch it in the new year. And so to that, I want to end off by talking about our raffle, which is our big annual fundraiser for this year. And every single cent that we can raise in our raffle goes to I'm Ready. And, you know, we're just a small charity, and we really need to have that financial support. And we are raffling, if you don't know it already, we're raffling a 100% electric vehicle, a Polestar 2 worth $74,000. And now is the perfect time if you haven't got a ticket. They're only $10. Get a ticket for yourself, get a ticket for your loved ones for Christmas. Here's the link. And please, every $10 ticket goes directly to our work that we can deliver over the next 2 years. It is needed now more than ever. So please, will you buy a ticket in our raffle? Thank you, Janet. Yes, go Nat, go Janet too. And yes, go Jo. So thank you, everybody. We are now in the decade that counts more than ever. And our I'm Ready campaign is our rallying call to women. And the bottom line is it needs us. This decade needs more women. It needs our creativity, our ingenuity, and our solutions. It needs us to marshal our collective power and our emotional intelligence, to gather our networks and to speak our truth to power. Thank you so much for all being here today. Everything we do matters, and thank you for being part of our beautiful 1 Million Women community. Over the next 2 years, our goal is to reach another 1 million women. So we really need your help, and we need to find women that aren't engaged in climate change yet and bring them along the road of empowerment. And so we need you all to help us do that. Please, if you haven't joined our social media channels, our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, LinkedIn, please join everything so that you can be part of I'm Ready as we get ready to launch in the new year.